Well, UCF's quarterback room goes from 5 to 4. Dylan Rizk enters the transfer portal. We'll get to all of that and our thoughts, plus the open practice last week, what I saw, and some interesting things as we head to the last week of spring camp. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Charge On. As always, I am your host, Sean Green. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, it's a fun time of the year, but also the sad time of the year where people that you thought would be on the team, or maybe not so on the team, but people that you like, are starting to figure out what they want to do for the fall. And that is the spring transfer portal window. Nick, this kind of just came out a couple days ago. I said we would talk about it. I have my thoughts. I've obviously watched Dylan over the past 3 weeks, and we saw him in the open practice, so I can kind of speak to that. But kind of give your initial thoughts when you saw it. Do you think it was a little bit premature? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't think it's overly surprising. I think if Dylan would have hopped into the portal after the season, I don't think anybody would have been shocked by the timing then. But we had the coaching change. We had 4 quarterbacks that were vying for this quarterback one job for 2025. Dylan was the best of the bunch of what we saw last year of the 4 that we got to see. And I think at one point we might have thought like, yeah, Dylan might have a shot to take the quarterback job and actually compete. And we were anxious to see that. And so he hits the portal now. I mean, the timing of it, they just had the quarterback media days last week, which when we talked about. And remember, Dylan was the one who was talking about, he was asked about why he didn't enter the portal. And he said, I committed to UCF. I didn't commit to a coach. And, he said all the right things, seemed to be very positive and upbeat. Coaches spoke good of him and everything. But, it might have been something, we've had about a month of spring practices to this point. And all these guys, I think, we're probably starting from square one because it is a brand new offense and it's a brand new head coach and brand new receivers, tight ends, everything's new, right? And maybe Dylan just didn't adapt as well, or he got a feeling that he wasn't going to be the guy. And at this point in Dylan's collegiate career, he wants to play. And of course he should want to play. So I'm not surprised at this whatsoever. I'd find it hard to believe that he's probably going to get I could be wrong, but I don't know if he's going to get a starting opportunity at the Power 4 level. But I think Dylan eventually will probably start. I think he could start for some programs in FBS for sure.
Yeah, listen, we've said on this podcast, we like Dylan Rizk. We think he has a lot of potential in what he showed last year. Not perfect, but what he showed, there was clearly something to work with there. Coming into spring, you knew it was a 4-person race. And realistically, a 3-person race, which is now kind of turned into a 4-person or 3-person now, but really there's a clear-cut, leader. But it took me a while to get there. But what we've seen out of Dylan Rizk this spring is, I'm going to be completely honest, hasn't been great. Now, granted, like I've said, we don't really get to see a lot. We only get to see certain things. Dylan was very up and down. And we said, I don't know if it was the coaching change and maybe just feeling a little bit of that pressure of, hey, like I need to basically be on my A game every single day. Taven Jackson was brought in to be the starting quarterback. Mackenzie Milton, Scott Frost can tell you that, we're splitting the reps. We don't know who's quarterback one. Taven Jackson looks the part. They brought him in. They paid him a boatload of money to be the starter. So if I'm Dylan Rizk, though it was commendable for him to stay and fight for that QB1 job, the play on the field this spring has not been amazing. It's been up and down. In the open practice period, take this with a grain of salt in the order, but in the one scrimmage-like team period, 11-on-11 team period that they did, Dylan was quarterback 4. They had Taven out first. They had Jakari out second. They had Cam Fancher out third, and they had Dylan out fourth. Dylan, actually, shout out Andrew Harris. Andrew Harris had a pick six off Dylan Rizk in the second team period, which was a really good pick. Dylan, I think, literally, Nick, I think Dylan only had maybe 5 plays in the open practice in the team period 11-on-11s because it just wasn't good enough. There was a fumble on one of them, so it wasn't his fault. But look, like I said, we really like Dylan. I like him a lot, but this is a clear-cut thing that Cam Fancher, in my opinion, has kind of proven that he can play a little bit. Definitely not as a starting caliber quarterback, but a guy that if a bunch of guys get hurt, he can play. Jakari Brown showed a lot of good things in the open practice, and we'll get to the open practice, but the writing was kind of on the wall, Nick, where it just looked like, and I think from Dylan's perspective, he wasn't performing to the caliber he needed to, and it was the thought process of why wait another week and go through the practices when ultimately I know that this is probably the decision they're going to come to.
Yeah, I'm going to trust your eyes on that because you've been out here at these practices and everything. But, I remember we were breaking down sort of what, McKenzie was talking about the offense and everything and some of the other quarterbacks saying. And I remember when I was hearing it, it didn't sound like it was, made for Dylan Rizk necessarily. And the facts are, at times Dylan, I think he plays with some really good rhythm and everything, and he can make some good throws. He's not the most athletic quarterback necessarily, but at the same time, I think last year he showed us that he can move just a little bit when he has to, and he can be a fun player to watch, right? I guess this is the last time we could use the moxie word describing Dylan Rizk, right? But in terms of where UCF wants to be and where the goals are and winning games in this conference, which is something they've struggled to do over the last 2 years, the reality is the ceiling was probably going to be really low if Dylan Rizk was the quarterback, especially with the inexperience that whoever the quarterback is going to be throwing to. So it was going to be an uphill battle for Dylan, but that's why you compete. And now one down, 3 to go to figure this out. But what I will say about Dylan, I feel that in a way, I still think he overachieved at UCF. I think he overachieved. And I say that about a guy who only played in 7 games at UCF. But, Sean, I don't think we ever thought Dylan Rizk was going to play in 7 games at UCF, no?
No.
It took a lot. It took a lot to go wrong for Dylan Rizk to get a shot. And I give him a lot of credit because that was a really tough situation last year. We were there for every home game. We watched every game on the road, these live streams we did, and it was a miserable, miserable season to sit through and cover. But when Dylan Rizk came in, that Arizona game, we'll always have that one. And he'll always be the last quarterback who gave Gus Malzahn maybe his last, because assuming Gus is never a head coach again in college football, he will be the last quarterback that gave Gus Malzahn a win as a head coach. That'll be a trivia question one day. So I think Dylan overachieved here, and he showed some good things, and I think he gave us some excitement last year at times in a season that didn't have much of it. Yeah,
and listen, ultimately, it sucks. You don't want to see any player enter the portal, but under these circumstances, that's just kind of how it looked, and that it's kind of how it is. We were surprised ultimately when he was coming back, because the way we were looking at it was, hey, Frost and KZ are going to give every kid an opportunity, regardless of what star you are. You're going to get an opportunity to come play. But at the same time, Dylan had to know coming in, I am fighting an uphill battle. I am the previous regime's quarterback. I had an up and down year last year, though, like you mentioned, and like we've said, no quarterback should be thrown into the position that Dylan Rizk had to be thrown into last year.
No.
So for that, and I still, I was a John Rice defender, and now everybody I talk to, including you, say, wow, I wish we had John Rice back at some times. I'm a Dylan Rizk fan. I think Dylan Rizk you can't watch the tape, the 4 games last year, and be able to say, oh, this is the ceiling for Dylan Rizk. Maybe the Arizona game was the ceiling, but there are some really good college football coaches that believe that Dylan Rizk is a bona fide stud. And I think with the right development, I think he could be a starter for a Power 4 program. Whether that happens this coming season or next year, I think he's got the game. I just think he needs a stable coaching staff and a competent coaching staff at that.
Yeah, and you mentioned too, like it wasn't fair to him to have to be thrown into the situation he was last year. And I think back to the fact that quarterback 4 has to come in and try to save the day after quarterback 1, quarterback 2, and then or quarterback 2 really got the short end of the stick, and that's EJ Colson.
Yeah.
Quarterback 1 and quarterback 3 couldn't run with the opportunity. Quarterback 2 got a short hook, and then Dylan Rizk comes in, has the best game of any UCF quarterback by far in the Arizona game. And then after that, he's dealing with, we're seeing it on the TV broadcast and in the stadium, like he's getting his ass chewed out by Gus Malzahn at times. And didn't it all seem like just a little unfair?
Yeah, it's like, what do you expect? You're on your 4th quarterback. Are you expecting so highly of the kid that he was going to transfer anyway, guys? Like that, we knew by week 2 when they threw him in there to get snaps against, I can't remember even the team. We were up in the press box like, yep, he's getting snaps for his film. We knew it.
It's only been 5 months since Gus has been gone or whatever it is, but that tenure's just not going to age well.
No.
There's just no way. Nobody's ever going to look back at these 4 years and go, man, that was a great time.
Well, I think here's the thing. I think people easily forget the 2 years in the American. Like they easily forget about it, where the first year was just injury plagued and the win against Florida.
I still think they underachieved.
No, they definitely underachieved, but it was still, in terms of quality, it was high-end years for the Gus Malzahn era. Not Correct. For the UCF era, but for the Gus Malzahn era. The first 2 years, it seemed like the upward trajectory was there.
Yeah.
And then it just fell flat on its face. So it sucks for Dylan, but ultimately, you have to give him a lot of props for coming back, competing for the job, when he could have easily left immediately when the coaching staff got fired and transferred out. So I commend him a lot for that and for, staying the course and competing. Yeah.
I'll be rooting for him. Just the same way like I'm still rooting for, Mikey Keene. And I know Mikey's probably going to be, quarterback 2 at Michigan, but shout out to him playing at a big program like that. And I hope, Dylan, everything works out.
It's interesting. I have no idea where he's going to go. But I think Tulane does make a lot of sense. I think if he wants to go into the American, I was talking about it with somebody earlier today, like Tulane would be a team that I think Dylan could really thrive at and can potentially lead them to a college football playoff berth, because I think he would be one of the more talented quarterbacks in that American conference, if not in the whole
for sure.
G5.
For sure.
So definitely rooting for Dylan, and we'll be keeping up with him definitely wherever he goes. But all right, with that said, let's get into the open practice, which I was at last week. The most we saw, I'll tell you that, we saw everything last week. Obviously, Nick wasn't there. I'm going to be kind of giving a quick recap of just my general thoughts. My notes suck. I'm going to be honest. I wrote notes. They're garbage.
How does one write garbage? Explain that to me. Why are they garbage?
I was ready. I was like prepared to write some really good notes, but we didn't know, we thought there was going to be like a scrimmage, and there wasn't a scrimmage. It was a quick, it was 11 on 11, but it wasn't a scrimmage. So I wrote notes on who the first team was, which I'll get into who was on the first team and the second team, because I think it's interesting. But there wasn't really a lot to write note. They did one-on-ones, and those are some interesting things to take away from. I have a couple things. Taven Jackson is good. He's by far and away the best quarterback on UCF's roster. It's not even close. He needs work, but there's time. But he just looks the part, Nick. I'm excited today for all of you that are watching this today. In about a couple hours, or an hour, there's going to be another open practice. We'll be there. We are going to drop I said we'd drop a video last week, but I felt like there wasn't enough to talk about. So I'll be dropping a quick little video after the open practice tonight. But Taven Jackson, I think if there were odds, you would make no money betting on Taven Jackson to be the starting quarterback. We talked about it on this show. Taven Jackson is going to be the starting quarterback for UCF come August. It's a done deal. It's a wrap. They can tell you what they want to tell you, coach speak, make players, fight for the job. Taven Jackson is the best quarterback on UCF's roster. And like I said, doesn't mean he is polished, Nick. Doesn't mean he is the, perfect quarterback. But you could tell, like, the balls that he throws, you almost forgot how a quarterback's supposed to throw the ball because of what we've been watching for the past couple years. Like, John Rice had to relearn how to throw the football. Last year was just abysmal. Watching Taven Jackson throw a football is a breath of fresh air, truly.
Well, I mean, I sort of like, this is not to downplay Taven Jackson or anything, but because I think, like, if everything goes well, like, he should be the quarterback one. Like, if Taven Jackson does not win the quarterback job, then that's on Taven Jackson, ultimately. But it sounds like from what you've said and what others have said that are there, that he seems to be performing really well and everything, and it looks different when the ball comes out of his hand than the others. But that's more so just me speaking to the fact that we've already seen the Jakari Brown experience at UCF. I saw it. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen Cam Fancher at UCF, but he played enough at FAU, and we got to look at that, and it wasn't great. To the point where when they took him, we were kind of like, all right, veteran depth. We never at one point ever have thought, like, yeah, Cam Fancher is going to be a starting quarterback at UCF. So Taven Jackson should win this competition. If all goes well and he does his part, Taven Jackson should win this quarterback competition, and it shouldn't be close. Yeah. That's the way I feel about it.
No, I agree. And when you see him in person and you see him live, it's not hard to see. The returners, the three guys that were catching the punts, Tavion Swint, and Tavion Swint is not live. He, I think, is dealing with some form of an injury. He's in a gold jersey. Burdell Richardson and Jaden Nixon. So those are the three that right now are catching the punts. You want to know the first team that trotted out there for the team periods, Nick? So you got Taven Jackson at quarterback, Miles Montgomery at running back. The three starting receivers, and again, all this is subject to change. This is just who was trotted out there.
You said Miles was running. You said Miles was at running back?
Miles was at running back. Miles Montgomery is going to have many touchdowns. He's going to have many. He's so good. I think UCF, I know we were a little nervous about the running back room like that. It went really young. You got RJ's gone, but you bring back Miles. The room went really young. Nick, the running back room, I think, is going to be just as good this year as it was last year. Like, you take the hit with RJ, but the depth on the running back side is really good. Like, Stacey Gage looks good. Adai, the guy we talked about last week, they call him AG. Miles Montgomery said he was better. He's better than Miles was as a freshman. So we'll get into the running backs. But starting at the receiver positions was DJ Black, Dwayne Thomas, the transfer from Charlotte.
Heard a lot of good things about Dwayne Thomas.
Dwayne Thomas is a stud. And Waden Charles, the freshman receiver. I'm going to say this. Waden Charles and Carl Jenkins Jr., Nick, the two freshmen, they're playing. They are going to play.
Love to hear it.
They are really good. They don't make mental mistakes that we've seen. Waden Charles looks the part. I'm going to be honest. Like, Waden Charles, you see him on the field, he's going to be a dude. Like, straight up, like, big-bodied receiver. He's going to be good. Starting offensive lineman. I should have wrote these down. I wrote the numbers, so I should have wrote the actual names down. But right now, I might have seen this wrong, but they have Paul Rubel playing left tackle right now. I'm pretty sure. So you got Paul Rubel playing left tackle, Jabari Brooks playing left guard. You have 52. Doing this live. Should have wrote the names down. That's on me. Oh, Carter Miller. So that was he's playing center, Carter Miller. He was the big-time transfer that UCF got, the 4-star transfer. He was going to go to Colorado originally, but then he flipped to UCF. Probably one of UCF's, if not UCF's best offensive linemen. He starts in the middle. Keegan Smith is starting at right guard, the redshirt senior. And then 78, if I can get to it. I should have wrote all these down. That's on me. Preston Cushman, the redshirt junior. So, and Preston Cushman is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Ole Miss transfer.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. So that was your starting 5 on the offensive line as of right now. Now this is all subject to change. They didn't do too bad. Like, they look pretty good. I'll say this, and maybe this is a good or bad thing. Sincere Edwards is really good at football. And when he was going up against the backup offensive lineman, he had a 3-play stretch of 2 sacks and a quarterback pressure in the 11-on-11 period. So Sincere Edwards is going to be a beast. When you watch him, he was getting double teamed and he was still pushing through. So I'd be shocked if he's not your starter there. But the backup, the second team that trotted out there was Carl Jenkins, so another freshman, Burdell Richardson, and Day Farmer with Jakari Brown at quarterback. And then it was kind of a tandem of A.G. Adai and Stacey Gage at running back. So I think the thought process, Nick, and this is kind of what I wanted to get into. That's just names. That's just what we're talking. I kind of gave all the thoughts there. But I do find it interesting because, especially at the receiver position, my fear, Marcus Burke is hurt. He got out.
He's the Florida transfer, right?
Huh?
Florida transfer, right?
Yeah, the Florida transfer. I saw him in person. Very skinny. Very skinny. So he was in the Florida weight program for 4 years. I thought he'd be a little bit bulkier. But he got hurt with a shoulder in practice this week. Know why he got hurt, but we're not saying it on here. Nothing crazy, just football. But I find it interesting. When you watch it, Nick, you have now, in just in this open practice, like I said, it could change, and who knows. You have 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores basically playing ball in your first and second team in terms of receivers. I think that is a changing of the guard a little bit, where I get with Gus. Xavier Townsend was a guy that they kind of threw out there year 1, and they're like, this kid's just dynamite, right? You have certain kids that kind of power through, like the Randy Pittmans.
Pittman, yeah.
Right. But this year, to see a couple of these guys in spring, like the Wade and Charles, who technically should be in high school still, the Carl Jenkins, the Burdell Richardsons starting to kind of just take shape. What does that say? Does that say more about the players, or does that say more about the staff?
Probably a little both. I mean, I've been sort of banging the drum for UCF to sort of get back to, yeah, you want to use the portal. Everybody's got to use the portal. We get that. But at some point, let's recruit, let's develop, and see if we can push some of these guys through. Now, you don't just do it for everybody. These guys have to go out and earn it, and I think that's pretty telling, especially at the receiver position. And I don't think the receivers necessarily surprises me as much, because that's such a wide open position. And even of the guys that were brought in as transfers this year, a lot of them don't really have a lot of production and or did it at a smaller school. So that doesn't surprise me as much, although I do love to hear it, because this recruiting class took a big hit not being able to hold on to Javon Boggs and him going to Florida State. And, Jenkins, I believe he was the one that recommitted right on signing day that we weren't really expecting. So that's a big one. And like you said, Wade and Charles going to play big dividends for them this year. And then on the defensive side too, I know like a Sincere Edwards, for example, you mentioned his name. I know that he is not a UCF recruit necessarily, but let's be honest, the old regime pretty much recruited him pretty heavily. And he only played the 1 year at Pitt and had good production. And we kind of figured that, yeah, if you're looking for someone to play next to John Walker on that defensive line, Sincere Edwards is probably going to fill that void. So or that Lee Hunter left and Ricky Barber and those dudes. So that doesn't really surprise me either. But yeah, I do like that off the start. It sounds like, anything you did there to begin with, or it doesn't matter if you were at the old regime or you had that jersey on before, seems like it's gone out the window. And the best players are going to play. And that's the way it should be. I don't know ultimately if they're going to have enough talent to turn this into some, they're going to have an uphill climb. And I know we're a long ways away from knowing what this team looks like, but they're going to have an uphill climb, I would say, to probably become bowl eligible next year. But we want to see strides. At the end of the day, you want to see strides and you want to see young players perform.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the real question is, can some of the guys that you maybe think are a certain skill level at this point play above that and develop quickly?
Yeah, and I'll be curious. I'd be curious too. Like as much as there's going to be outgoings, how active do they get in the portal this time around? They had no option. They had to be active in the portal in the winter because the roster was heavily depleted. I wonder how they are now in the spring.
Well, I'll say this. Obviously, there was 40 new players, right? 40 new players on the roster. If I'm a player that I've committed to UCF, now granted, they probably have a good idea of where they are on the depth chart at this point. And I'm sure the coaches will have conversations with certain players like, hey, this is where we're at with you. Like, and I'm not, there was probably a conversation with Dylan Rizk. Like, I'm sure KZ and Scott Frost had to sit down and were like, hey, like, just being honest, you're probably not going to start and you're probably not quarterback 2 either. So maybe go find a better opportunity. So I'm sure with some of those guys, they'll have that conversation. But this is kind of the perfect school for a kid if you did come here through the transfer portal this season specifically. Because really, so much is up in the air. Even if a guy's first team now, if the first game he goes out and lays an egg, you're right there behind him to take over. So I don't know how many players UCF's going to have through the portal. It is, like you said, dependent on what they lose. Like, I'm assuming they're going to go find a quarterback too, just to, again, Mackenzie Milton said it. Like, they need to, if they lose a guy, they don't want to lose a guy, but if they lose a guy, they're going to have to replace him with somebody. So a quarterback is definitely something to look for, but they're definitely going to have to shore up some other positions.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's some other positions too that I don't mind just flooding talent in there and getting some infusion. And because I think as we're recording right now, there was a player that just hit the portal, and Stephen Leonard just brought it to attention on Twitter. He's a linebacker named Makai Gabayor, I believe is how that pronounced. But he was at Nebraska. He committed to Missouri, and now he has entered the portal again. And yes, I said he was at Nebraska. He was recruited by Scott Frost. And that's a guy who I did a quick little look up real quick. And he was a 12-game starter last year for Nebraska. 49 tackles, a sack, 3 PBUs, 2 fumble recoveries. Decent production on Nebraska's defense, which was a pretty good unit. So don't know anything about what happened at Missouri, but he's in the portal. And because he has ties to Frost, makes sense.
Could be a name.
It could be a name. So I'm curious to see how active they get in that direction.
Well, it seems like linebackers, we're not talking about it today, but the linebacker position is a position that the staff is trying to shore up, not just this season, but in many seasons. UCF is getting commitments from a bunch of guys in this 2026 class. We'll probably talk about that in the coming weeks, but I think they've got 3 linebackers already committed. So that is definitely a position that Scott Frost and the staff are going after heavily. And I do think UCF, we've talked about it, I think, on last week's episode, but UCF has some good depth at that linebacker position, but you can never, you can always use more.
And Gabayor has 2 more years of eligibility, so he's not just a 1-year rental.
That's crazy. He played under Scott Frost and he still has 2 years left. Isn't that crazy?
I don't understand NCAA eligibility, and I've given up trying to figure it out.
I think it's the COVID thing too. We're getting to the end of that, so there's not many of them left.
Yeah, it's like the house settlement stuff that's going on, and I try to read up on it, and I find myself just more and more confused on what it means. And I'm completely gassed out on any legal talk in the NCAA going forward.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. It is.
I don't know if it helps UCF at all either. It sounds like it just helps the big programs, or it's helping them. I don't know.
Usually, but if like with this guy, I mean, that would be a nice addition, just for depth purposes alone, if you needed it. And you will, to this point, as we close out the show, you will definitely be able to tell which positions UCF feels like they need, with how they hit the portal. If they're hitting the portal and they're going after a couple offensive linemen, then they don't feel good about the depth that they have on the roster. And that's not to say that's always, perfect. Like I said, they're going to go get a quarterback, and I'm sure they feel content with Jakari, Cam, and Taven, right? But it does say something if you're going into the portal and getting a couple of one position. That definitely says, okay, you're a little nervous about this position that you're going after. But all in due time, we will figure that out. Nick, any final thoughts before we close this one out?
Like I sort of said earlier, big fan of Dylan Rizk. Unfortunate it didn't work out. But again, I think his overall body of work at UCF was more than I think we thought we were going to get out of him. So shout out to him for continuously working under a tough situation. And we'll always remember the Arizona game. And I'll always remember the feeling that we had in the press box when that ball landed in Randy Pittman's hands on that Hail Mary. That was beautiful. But yeah, I think he was the focal point of this episode for sure. And so wishing him well. And we'll see what happens with this quarterback room.
Absolutely. Guys, what do you think? Am I going to see you tonight? Are you coming to the last open practice of spring?
Oh, how was the attendance, by the way? Was it good?
Not good.
Not good? Okay.
Not good.
But did they only have a limited amount of people, though?
Yeah, like, it's weird. Like, I think with the construction, they can't really sit anybody over there, even though it's open and it's fine and it looks like you could walk over there. I think they're being very specific and careful. So you can only really go on the other side of the stadium. I think it was mostly friends and family of the players.
How long is the open practice?
The open practice was about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I mean, it was a long chunk of time. And then we had interviews after. So, like, I'll say that was the most I've learned about the team in that 2 hours. And they ran a lot of stuff. So, why are you thinking about coming tomorrow?
No.
It's a Friday.
I will be working.
He works.
I will be working.
All right, everybody. Let me know what you think down below. What you think about Dylan transferring? What do you think about the open practice? Were you there? Did you attend? What did you see? Did we see the same thing? Let us know. Please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Like I said, I'll be dropping a quick little video tomorrow, kind of recapping what we saw in the open practice tomorrow. That's going to really give us more of an idea, because the next week we have spring practices. It's the final spring practices, but it's really the end. They're not really doing much. You're not going to learn much. It's closing out the spring and exit interviews with the players. So be on the lookout for that as well. Everybody, this has been Charge On. We will see you next week.